opportunity. That was fantastic, man. Thank you so much for sharing that. So, I had announced that my parents were going to be sharing today, and I do apologize, they're not here with us today. Earlier in the week, my mom went to the doctors. They were running some tests, and they advised her that there needs to be a little bit further investigation into that, and so they decided to go back to South Carolina because that's where they're actual residents, so for insurance sake and all that stuff, it would just make it easier. So they actually hit the road yesterday. They were here for Thanksgiving, which was amazing. We were just able to have some time with the parents, because since they've been back, it's been pretty busy for them, going to all the supporting churches and everything. So they do send their love and everything. They wish they could be here. They really wanted to. Literally on Thanksgiving, but I was like, no, I think we're good. And then like the next day, he was like, we're going to South Carolina. I was like, all right, I knew that. Like, you caught up now. So I was praying about what I wanted to speak about, and it was really cool. So this was actually the sermon that I planned for last Sunday, but that didn't exactly happen. Some other things happened. And I was like, God, is this like the same thing you want me to talk about? And he was like, you got the green light. I did that on purpose because I knew this week was going to be busy and you didn't need to write a second sermon. I was like, oh, thank you. I appreciate that. See, God takes care of us. He knows what we need before we need. And so, I think to introduce this topic, I kind of wanted to let you in on something. Just a little piece of it. But we have been discussing as a leadership, and if you're unaware of this, every other week I'm on a call with all the pastors from all the different life churches. And we've just kind of been discussing things for next year, which next month is probably when we're going to get more into that and kind of like bring everybody else up to speed on what that's going to entail. But something that was really impressed on our hearts is just the hardship, and this is something we've been discussing a lot, the hardship that life has been over the last couple of years. We're almost coming up on 2 years of COVID being a part of this world. And how things are difficult, and it's made things more stressful, and it's made things harder for traveling. I'm just really glad that my parents got here before South Africa had closed. And it's been harder. We've been more isolated and alone with our thoughts, which is not good sometimes. But sometimes also really good if you needed that space to do that. But it's just kind of been a harder space. And we were discussing that with as a leadership, we're like, okay, is it just immediately and instantly going to get easier and quicker and better? And we're feeling very strongly that it might not be that quick. And I'm sorry to start this message out this way, but God has really put on our hearts recently to want to be preparing for if things get worse or if they don't. Because if they get better, that's great. But if things only get a little bit harder or more difficult, we want to be ready. And so I wasn't planning on sharing this today, but God put that on my heart to start it out that way. And so we've been on the series on family. And I want to kind of wrap up our series on family today, talking about something very practical. And that is core values. And I specifically wanted to talk about core values because if things do get harder, if things do get easier, however our futures unfold, these are very important things that we need in our lives to help dictate where we're going and how we're going to do it. Does that make sense? And so, it is a very practical sermon. As I've read through it multiple times, I was like, it's just kind of like straightforward information and tools in that sense. But I feel it's really important. I really feel like God is wanting to solidify and strengthen families within His body. Because that's how God wants to change the world. When we're a part of a family, and when we have our own family, and we have our church family, and we're expanding and growing together, that's how we can change this world. And so, I wanted to really talk about that. So, we're going to just focus on core values. And so, the first thing is, what are core values? Okay? And I know you're all probably thinking like, you're probably all getting reminded of that moment where you walked into work and the manager comes out and he's like, all right, guys, today we're all going to sit in a circle and talk about our core values. And everybody goes, no, not again. Because they do it every other month. Or the team meeting where they have the core values posted up on the wall and they make us all recite it. Have you ever been work one of those jobs? Am I the only one who's been through that? Okay, you've all done that. And like it can kind of seem like this very corporate-y, very artificial type thing. And that's how I always thought about it. But God, a while back, really put on me and B that we need to start talking about these things. We have to start adding them into our lives. And I was pleasantly surprised at some of the things and how they affected me. And so I'll give you an example. Before we decided to have core values, and when we added core values, I did not expect decisions to become easier. That was like the weirdest surprise to me. Like when we started defining our values, we had a couple of like major life-changing things happen within the few years afterwards, where it was just like, all right, no, yes, maybe, let's talk about that a little bit more. It just like literally instantly made things faster, including the decision to leave this church. And it was just like it was so amazing. And so I just wanted to encourage us before we get into all of that core values can drastically alter family dynamics. And me and B have directly seen that and how cool it's been. So, core values are the beliefs, principles, and the foundation that define a culture. I'm going to say that one more time. It's the values, core values are the beliefs, principles, and the foundation that defines a culture. And so I would like to kind of put it this way. This was a good example that somebody told me, and so I want to share it. So imagine a map. Imagine you have a map, okay? And that map is your life. And so we've all looked at maps. I'm not talking about the one on your computer. I'm talking about like an actual physical map. If you're 14, you might never ever seen one. But I'm talking about a map. And think about a map. And think about this map as being your life. And when we're going through life, we set goals. We have visions. We have things that we want to accomplish, or where we want to go, or things that we might want to do, or places we might want to travel. We have these things, right? But values are the markers and indicators in which we will use to choose the road we will take on our journey. So when we define our core values, we're literally deciding, okay, are we going to take 80 or 55? Those are different directions, I know that, but I don't. Two highways that go the same direction, but parallel. And that's how we can decide it. It's literally indicators to say, hey, we're going to take this exit at this time to get onto this road to go to this place, and it literally can define it. And we've all been on trips, especially back in the day. I remember in the 90s taking trips, and mom, like, you know something was up when mom whips out the map, and there's like a very hushed but serious conversation, and they're like, we're definitely lost right now. And they're like, they got the magnifying glass, and then you get the atlas book, and then you're like, oh no, this is really bad. We might be sleeping in the car today. Oh no. But core values help us choose the road we will take on our journey. They define that. They define what road we're going to take. Are we going to take the scenic back road? Are we taking the highway? Are we going to go through multiple towns? What stops are we going to take on this journey that we call life? So core values help define our culture. Did you all know that Life Church Morris has some core values? Show up here. Yes, we have some core values, okay? I'm going to throw them up there really quick, okay? Life Church Morris's core values are worship, kingdom culture, and revival, okay? Those are our indicators as a body to where we want to go. When we set vision, we want to do something, those are the things that help us define how we're going to get there, okay? And the vision for Life Church Morris is to build a radical, relevant church that empowers people to express God's heart, fulfill their dreams, and change the world. I had to read that. You know Dan. Dan is the pastor there, but he just recites it like that, and not to that level yet. But he also wrote it. So that is our vision. We want to build a radical, relevant church that empowers people to express God's heart, fulfill their dreams, and should change the world. So if they're radical, but they're not engaged in worship, is that the road we're going to take? No, we're not going to take that road. We want a radical, relevant church that is engaged in worship. If we want people to express God's heart, if they're not expressing it through kingdom culture, what God has given us, well, then that's not the road we're going. We're getting off course, and we got to correct ourselves, and we got to get back onto it. And so that's all to say that that is the purpose. That is what core values are. They define our culture and where we're going. So the next question I want to ask is, did God give us values? Was he all about core values? And I had to think about that one. And the first thing that came to mind was the Ten Commandments. That was the first, that's a pretty early example. There's probably some other examples. I know there's some stuff in Genesis that I was looking up that indicate God-given values. And we often just think about it as rules or laws when you look at all the Ten Commandments. But that was him really trying to affect and change something. Okay? And I would like to say this, that the Israelites, the reason that these values were more like rules is because the bar was very low for the Israelites when he was setting it. We always talk about as the Israelites as being God's chosen people. And we always just think, oh, they're instantly, immediately holy, and they were just, awesome people. But if you read the Old Testament, that's not always the case, and they made mistakes. If you read the law, this is what I've always asked myself. If the Israelites were also perfect, then why did God have to give them a rule not to have sex with animals? There was a pretty low bar there. That's in the law. And it's because they didn't have any general way to define their culture and their ethics and how they were going to do things. They didn't have that. And most of them were pretty basic values, don't kill people. Murder's pretty bad. That's kind of setting a low bar, right? Don't steal something, don't worship other idols, and all those things. But some of them were really going after the heart of culture, which was honor your mother and father. And one of them is rest. You must observe rest. And God knew how important that was. If people were just working themselves to death, how are they supposed to get anything done? They're just going to burn out all the time. Another place where we really see values coming out is in Mark chapter 12. We're going to start in verse 28. It says, one of the teachers of the law came and heard them debating. Noticing that Jesus had given them a good answer, he asked them, of all the commandments, which is the most important? The most important one, Jesus answered, is this. Hear, O Israel, the Lord your God, the Lord is one. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, and with all your soul, and with all your mind, and with all your strength. And the second is this. Love your neighbor as yourself. There is no commandment greater than these. So Moses introduced the law because there was a pretty low bar set, like I just described. And then Jesus came in and he just went after the heart of the culture. Because literally, if you look at the Ten Commandments, or you look at the law, you can literally fit almost everything in there, literally everything in there, under loving God completely or loving your neighbor as yourself. You're not going to murder your neighbor if you love them as yourself. You're not going to worship an idol or take the Lord's name in vain if you love your God, if you love God with all your heart, mind, and soul. So Jesus came through and kind of shifted it a little bit. He was like, no, we're going to go for rules, and we're going to go right into the culture of things. What does it mean? We're going to go to the heart of it. Thinking, I'm supposed to tell this. No, I'm supposed to tell this right there. It's in my notes. I remember now. So the next thing I want to ask is, are we to establish our own core values or our own values? Is that something we're supposed to do? And I would say the answer is yes. In Proverbs 24, starting in verse 3, it says, by wisdom a house is built, and through understanding it is established. Through knowledge its rooms are filled with rare and beautiful treasures. Some translations say rare and beautiful riches. But that word house in the Hebrew language literally means your family. It's talking about like the house. Like if you ever watch like old night movies, they're like the house of Gimli or something like that, and like the house of Gandalf or whatever. And so they talk about this, and it's talking about the house. It's talking about everything. It's talking about the physical structure. It's talking about the family dynamic. It's talking about the people. It's talking about the people that you hire to work within that house. So in modern day, it would even apply to businesses. But that is what we're talking about, is house. And so I want to kind of shift from talking about like biblical perspective and kind of dissect this specific verse and kind of give the practical tools and how we form core values or values for our own houses. Does that sound good? And it's really cool because I'm going to be speaking very truthfully to kind of the process that me and Bee went through when we were forming it. And just how amazingly that we went through what we went, but we did not have this verse when we went through it. That was something that God revealed to me, and how amazingly they connect. That we went through it, and we practiced it, and we applied it. But then how God was just like, this is how you're going to teach it. So I just thought that was cool. So I want to just discuss the 3 key elements in that verse. And those are wisdom, understanding, and knowledge. Okay? We're going to kind of dissect those 3 elements. And those 3 things are the things that we do to create values and core values for our houses. Okay? So wisdom. Let's define wisdom. Wisdom is the soundness of an action or decision with regard to the application of experience, knowledge, and good judgment. Okay? See, wisdom is recognizing the need for change. There's this quote often people say, and they say that like insanity is defined as this, which is not accurate, but it's a really good saying because it actually has some truth to it. And it says, "It is not wise to do the same thing twice and expect different results." See, wisdom is a decision and an action that uses all of our life experience to say we need to make a good decision and take action that will benefit us and our families long term. See, when me and Bee were going through this, when we were like deciding it, we had to really analyze, and we started noticing some key markers in our families. We were looking at our relationship. We were looking at both of our parents' relationship. We were looking at the people around us, the friends that we had, the church that we were going to, the relationships between our siblings, and all these things. And we were looking at them and analyzing them. And we're like, all right, they're doing that really, really good. But we're not doing that. We need to be doing that. Why aren't we doing that? And we started going through this and we started analyzing it. And that's where that wisdom came in. We started realizing, oh, we should be doing something different. Then we were noticing other things where it's like, hey, this part of our relationship, this part of our family is not fantastic. This is causing a lot of issues. We seem to be fighting about this every couple of months. We need to figure this out. What's going on? Then we started dissecting that. We're like, oh, this is really similar to how our friends are going through this. Well, that's not a good thing. Why are we doing the same thing? We can see what they're doing wrong, but we're doing the same thing. So what do we got to do? So we literally took everything that we could know, and we were analyzing. And literally, it was discussions. We were like, what is this? How do we do this? Sometimes we were fighting about it. Sometimes it works. But it was just like this long discussion of us analyzing and being like, okay, it's not that our life is bad. It's not that our marriage is bad. It's not that our family is bad. But we knew that it could be more. And that was the conviction God put on our hearts when we decided to go on this journey. It was just like, hey, you're great. I love you. But I have more for you. And I want you to figure that out. So we started analyzing all that. And by I said we, I mean Bee was really researching a lot of stuff. Because that's her. That's her personality, 100%. She's like, all right, I found a problem. I'm going to read 5 books, and then we're going to have a discussion. I'm like, can I read one of them? I like to be even on the playing field when we have this discussion. And so we really had to ask ourselves is where was our family at? And that's what I want to encourage everyone here, is when we take wisdom to build our houses, we gotta ask, where are we at? You gotta ask yourself, do you meet the 10 commandments or the greatest commandments? And I'm gonna be pretty vulnerable. There were some certain areas in our lives where when we started discussing values, they looked like the 10 commandments. Because the bar was pretty low in those specific areas. Specifically, we went through a phase that we were like, hey, we need to establish some values for how we have arguments. And at first, it was mainly, don't do this, don't do that, don't do that, don't do that. And that's what it looked like. Because that was the place that was hurting really, really bad in our relationship. But then there was other areas where it was like, all right, we're just going to attack the cultural things. And this is what we got to do. So we can make a wise choice to do something. We can analyze and ask ourselves where we're at. And we can say, yes, we need to make a change. We want to do something. We want God to come in and really grow our relationship. But if we don't fully understand what we are set out to do, then it probably will not take root in our lives. And that was the next part. Okay, so the next part of that verse is understanding. Through understanding, your house is established. See, understanding, we define it as, understanding is revealed. Let's start that over. Okay, the definition of understanding. Understanding is revealed when a person autonomously, I'm going to choke on my water again, hold on. Autonomously makes sense of and transfers their learnings through authentic performance. That's a whole lot of words. So as I was kind of going through this, understanding can actually be broken down into 6 facets of understanding. There's multiple things that you've got to go through in order to know that you fully understand something. And so this is kind of a big chunk right here, where we're going to go through it really quick. And so I'm going to explain what the facet of understanding is, and then also give a practical example of something that me and Dee went through. So that way everybody can kind of understand. Does that sound good? Very good. Awesome. So the first facet of understanding is explain. Okay? You got to be able to explain something to understand something. Okay? So for me and B, we could explain an area in our life, in our family, that was hurting. And that was, I deal with feeling rejected. Sometimes in our arguments or discussions, it was, I feel lonely, or I feel abandoned, I feel isolated, I feel these things. That often led to a lot of fights. But we were able to explain it. So does that mean we fully understood it? No. That means we could define it. We could point it out and say that. That was part of the aspect of the wisdom that we were applying to our lives. We could identify something was wrong in a specific area. The next facet of understanding is interpret. Okay? And that's where we can interpret things. And we can start kind of dissecting what they are. Okay? So for me, that looked like I had key moments and relationships in my life that ended in or made me feel rejected. Okay? And so now I'm like, okay, I'm dissecting that a little bit. This thing is causing this, and that's affecting my marriage right now and my family right now, because that's how I felt. The next facet of understanding is self-assess. For this looked like when I think I'm going to be rejected, I avoid the relationship because I am scared of and don't know how to have connection and intimacy. That's when it got to the real analyzing part in me and B's relationship. And we both had aspects of this that were causing issues when we felt rejected in our relationship. And this directly affected us. And it was like, man, we're both avoiding things because we're scared of that feeling of rejection. The next facet is empathize. This one happened rather quickly after self-assess for us. And this one is pretty hard because it's really hard to, this is a hard pill to swallow. But you gotta empathize. And for me, that looked like that person did not know what my needs were. So how could they connect with me? I literally had to come to the realization that I played a role in my own feeling of rejection. That was a hard pill to swallow. And B came to a pretty similar revelation. And then we started dissecting that. We're literally in our discussions, we were like, oh, I figured this thing out. This is why we're having this problem in this area. This is why it's causing some blockage when we are wanting to connect or go deeper in our relationship. Then we had to shift our perspective. So now we're starting to understand it. We're dissecting it. We're taking it apart. We're realizing that there's issues. We've already made the decision to go on this journey because that was wise. But now we're really starting to understand it. And now we have to shift our perspective. All right, it's up there. And this is for me what it had to be. It was being rejected once does not mean I have to run or be afraid of intimacy or connection. And we both had to analyze this, and we talked about it, and we cried about it, and then we did it again and again. And we just kept going through it. And so we were resolving it. And I won't be surprised if down the future we have another conversation and cry about it again. Because God is good, and He's always revealing things, and He's always creating healing. And so that was the moment. So I want to go back to the example of the map. Okay? That was the moment where it was like, oh, we're on this road. And we know we don't want to be on this road. This culture kind of stinks. We don't want to do this anymore. But we don't know how to get off this road. So then that's the moment where we were looking at our map and we were literally, oh, in 2.8 miles, we need to get off at that exit. Because there's another road that we want to be on. And that's the moment where we decided, all right, let's get into the lane. Right lane. Most exits are on the right lane. I'm in Zimbabwe right now. And so that's where the moment where, if I was going to make this the map example, that's the moment we got into the lane. We got ready to get onto the next road. And we got off the exit and we started traveling. And while we were there, we kind of got lost a little bit because we weren't exactly sure where the other road was. But we made it. We knew that this was not the road and that's the road that we want to be on. That's the culture that we want in our family. And that's the moment we shifted our perspective. We changed direction. And then we had to apply it. Which in theory sounds really awesome. But it took a lot of vulnerability to realize that, oh, I deal with feelings of rejection and abandonment and loneliness and all these things that are playing a role in creating a really unwelcoming, unconnected culture in my family was terrifying. How the heck do we get to that place without opening up and being vulnerable? So we had to apply it. And there was more crying and more hugging and more deep discussions. But that's what had to happen for us to be able to do it. And like sometimes it would be really great. It'd be like, hey, we've been doing fantastic. And then a new variant of what we were dealing with would happen. And we'd be like, oh, we need to work on this more. And then we'd do it. And it would be constantly apply. And we would talk about these things. And at first, when me and B were discussing these things, it's not like we were like, all right, we're going to sit down and here's our 3 bullet points and now we're going to make core values. And it looked nothing like that. It was literally discussion. It was relational. We literally were just talking about, well, we don't like how we do this. We don't like how our feeling of abandonment and rejection is causing us to be disconnected in our family. And it's causing us to not spend time together. So we were like, oh, we want to have a value of quality time. Let's make that a priority. Let's do this. And then we found out some other stuff, and we were like, okay, let's apply this value. And it was literally us just discovering values until we narrowed it down, and we realized that our core value that we desired for our culture and our family was connection. And that applied to us, just our marriage, that applied to our children and how we want to raise our children, and that applied to our relationship with God instantly. And now I'm going to go back to what I said, it made decisions easier. Literally, I had job opportunities come up. And because I knew that job opportunity was going to hinder my ability, meaning it was going to be too long of a drive, like I get it, I'm going to be at work for a certain amount of time. I get that I'm not going to be home and being connected with my family. But the drive was too far, so instantly it was a no. Without hesitation, that job was going to cause me to not be connected with my family. I don't have to have a second thought, I'm not taking it. That's how core values can really come in and apply and really make an effect. So I know that was a lot of things. So the 6 facets of understanding. Let me look there. Other way, George. There we go. The 6 facets of understanding are explain, interpret, self-assess, empathize, shift perspective, and apply. Understanding is dissecting the areas of your life that are messy and applying the value that will correct it. It's changing roads. So that covers 2 of the things in that verse, okay? Where we have wisdom, understanding, and knowledge. Okay, so if you ever feel like, hey, we're kind of in this weird spot, and we want to make a change, that's wisdom knocking on the door of your heart, saying, hey, you need to do something. But you can't do anything until you fully understand it, and that's what that area is. And that's honestly, guys, it's a lot of hard work, but it is fun, and it's still hard work. Maybe you're still going through things. But it's awesome, because when we see the fruit of it, it blesses us so much. Okay, so now the third thing in that verse is knowledge. Knowledge is the way in which we receive, or this is how we fill our rooms with rare and valuable riches. That's how we build our house. With knowledge, we fill our rooms with rare and valuable riches. So what is knowledge? Okay? Knowledge is information and skills acquired by a person through experience or education, the theoretical or practical understanding of a subject. When you go on this journey, when you're creating the core values, it's going to take some information. You're going to have to listen to some podcasts. You're going to have to get some prayer. You're going to have to read some books. You're going to have to read your Bible. You're going to have to talk to people that you trust. It's a journey. You're going to have to learn something to be able to apply it and understand it. You're going to have to learn something. You might even have to seek counsel in the wisdom stage. I know we did that where we asked people, we're like, hey, how do you guys handle this kind of stuff? And those people would tell us, hey, we did this. Oh, yeah, we kind of dealt with that. No, that wasn't really us. We didn't talk to you. And we actually had to seek out counsel. So getting knowledge and filling our house with riches applies to the entire process. Wisdom is how we build a house, and understanding is how we establish it to bear fruit. But knowledge is how we store up riches in our family. As you are understanding your values and needs, it is going to take some learning, like I said. But the biggest thing, and this is where knowledge becomes the riches that you store up in your rooms, okay? See, knowledge is transferable. See, if we don't dedicate the time or seek counsel to make a wise decision, and then go through all the steps of understanding, how can we acquire knowledge to give it to our children? To give it to our siblings, our parents, the people around us, our best friends. So then when we have somebody in our lives, we're like, hey, something's knocking on the door to wisdom in our lives, and we want to make something change. If we don't go through all of that and actually learn something, how are we supposed to help them? See, I am so thankful for the people in our lives that we were wanting to make something, we were recognizing that there was a need for change, that we could go to them and be like, hey, why does this stink? And they were like, oh, because of this. That was a practical part of this. We actually had to invite people into our process and get counseling. And because those people had already gone through it and were able to literally just hand us, they were just like, here's some knowledge, you're welcome. Yeah, good. They were literally able to just hand it over to us so that we could move further than they made it to. And that's the same thing for our kids. We decided to get on a certain road, establish our culture, where we're going. And that's the road that our kids are already on. Does that make sense? Our kids are already on that road. Your house can already be on that road. Meaning, maybe it's not the best road, but it's a better road than the road that you were on. And now your kids can take an exit to get on a better road, if they need to. And then your grandkids and their great-grandkids and so on and so forth can keep on getting on a different road until you've solidified the perfect culture that your family needs. It's kingdom culture. See, we lead by example. So give our knowledge away and pass it on to your family. That's how we do it. I know this kind of sounds like I'm talking about like specifically family groups, but this even applies to people who don't have families or are single. It's actually a lot easier because there's not like as much debating. You can literally go to a complete third party, get a mentor, and be like, "Yo, what's wrong?" Just point it out. Let's deal with it. And there's not a messy conversation happening, but you can establish your culture on your own. And guess what? You're going to have to reestablish your culture if you ever do marry or start a family. You're going to have to rediscuss it, but at least you're a step further because you've established what your culture was on your own. Our riches is pushing those around us further than we were able to go. That's our riches, guys. That's how we do this. So I'm not going to lie, it takes a lot of work to build core values. And I will say this, whenever you think oh yeah, we want to kind of establish our values, we want to be discussing these things, it's not like a week-long process. I'm going to be honest, we started this a few years ago, it's still ongoing. We're still pinpointing exact values to define what road we're taking. But we're on a better road, and if we need to take an exit and shift something, we know we can have that conversation. So I wanted to kind of end off with this. See, when God gave the Israelites their values, when He gave them the law through Moses, He said this in Deuteronomy chapter 6, starting in verse 6. These commandments that I have given you today are to be on your hearts. Impress them on your children. Talk about them when you sit at home and when you walk along the road, when you lie down and when you get up. Tie them as symbols on your hands and bind them on your foreheads. Write them on the doorframes of your house and on your gates. That still applies to our values, that when God wants us to make values for ourselves, that still applies to this day. That's not just for the law. What God gives us and the values that He wants to reveal, the things that He wants to create in our families to dictate our culture and be the markers for our journey, we need to talk about them all the time. And I'm going to be honest, that's exactly how it happened with me and Pete. We'd have discussions while we were driving, and then somebody would cut me off, and then we'd have an argument about the values, and then we would cool down, and then we talk about them rationally again. I'm going to use a car reference every start, just so you know. But literally, when we were going places, there was a discussion. When we were after you put the kids to bed, it was like, all right, let's talk about this thing. All right, we got up, we got a chill day today. Let's discuss these few things. Let's pray about it. Let's seek the Lord. Let's set up time to get counsel on this. It was ongoing, and it's a part of our conversation. We still are talking about it all the time, like, hey, how do we want to do this? This is really big because we have a 4-year-old. And the kid that I have today is not the kid that I had a year ago, as far as what I'm trying to teach him and how I'm trying to raise him, because kids shift constantly. Even my 1-year-old, oh my gosh, he's completely different than he was last month. But we have to constantly discuss it. Okay, how do we make sure that he understands our values of these? He's 1. We gotta be talking about it. So I just wanted to leave this off and kind of leave a challenge for the church today, is that it's going to take time. But I really encourage everybody to start talking about your values with your family. And don't sit down and all right, here we go. We're going to have a meeting. And here's our 3 core values. You're allowed to have another 3 core values. It doesn't have to be defined. Honestly, I would encourage you to simply start analyzing the areas that are problematic and applying values to correct them. And it might take a few values for you to realize, oh, we need this core value in our family. And so I say this because, 1, we don't know what the future holds, but having a strong family foundation is key to all of it. But I also say it because we've got a pretty significant holiday coming up in the next month. There's going to be a lot of weird dynamics. There's a lot of stress and a lot of seeing people. And so I would really encourage us to start talking about values leading up to Christmas. You're not going to get them all down. You're not going to solidify your core values in a month. I know that. Don't hear me saying that as an expectation. But just simply having discussions to talk about them, it's amazing how that will greatly affect the time that you have with your family. When me and B started doing this, and we started defining our values, it literally led to us having a discussion before we went on a trip, a vacation. It literally led us to a discussion of hey, how do we want this vacation to go? If these are our values, how can we make sure we enjoy this vacation based on those values? And that was the topic she brought up. She was like, I'd really like to discuss this. And I was like, this is weird. I was like, did you read this in a book? Did you? No, I don't think so. She knew I did. This is a B original. And I was like, this is weird, but it helped so much. And that was the same thing with holidays. It's like, hey, how do we want this time we spend as a family, how do we want it to go down? What do we want to do? How are our values going to be a part of it? And it just made it easier to enjoy the time with the people that we have and with the time that we have with each other. So I just want to encourage everybody to start talking about it.